Hey, Sophia, out of respect for the people who are actually here and showed up, could we at least hear their presentations? And these people can talk after the people who are actually here make their presentations. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and start from the beginning.
Yes, just a second.
Okay. So I'm David Monk. I'm the senior utility engineer for the city of Georgetown. And this is item AQ. It's the consideration and possible action to approve an application for a stormwater permit consisting of 41.658 acres in the Walters LS Survey AWO 653, generally located at 32501 Ronald Reagan Boulevard, to be known as the concrete batch plant. This application, like probably about 15 a year, triggered a stormwater permit because they were adding impervious cover. It also, if they would have moved dirt around, did some grading, it would have triggered a stormwater permit. It looks a lot like a site plan, but it's mainly health and safety. It's drainage, it's driveway permitting, it's traffic, the generated traffic on a site like this. We look at those items. Even fire protection comes out. Fire protection, where it's in our district, our fire district, and they have a right to look at it. We have tree protection and mitigation, the city water quality ordinance, the geologic assessment, all that goes out there. With this one, also, the other permits would be a WPAP, a water pollution abatement plan for the TCEQ. A concrete patch plant also has an air quality permit, which they have shown they already have. And then after construction, there's what's called a stormwater discharge permit. That goes with all batch plats from what I understand. This site is over the Edwards recharge zone. It's a large site. They've only added 12% impervious cover, is all they're asking. Stormwater permit, we've looked at their drainage calculations. They've used a good method. They're controlling the runoff rate to the neighboring property. That's what a stormwater permit does. It follows our drainage codes as if it was in the city. It's totally as if it was in the city. Drainage, traffic, impervious cover limits, we have that. We have tree mitigation, tree protection. They did that. They are mitigating for some trees. They're not removing any heritage trees, but they are mitigating. And I have the numbers if you'd like to hear it, but they're mitigating for some trees that they've removed. They're adding decel lanes and a center turn lane. It's a fast road. It's 60 miles an hour. We're getting trucks off of it. They didn't trigger a turn lane, but they're adding them. I can't see any codes they haven't met. They've gone through it about 4 times. We had comments up to this is draft 4, and they've met everything that I can tell. I can answer any questions if you have any more questions on it.
Mr. Monk?
Yeah.
Good evening. I do have a question. You said that the applicant has secured a air quality permit. So are we comfortable that the plant will meet emission limits set out by the TCEQ? Particularly what I'm looking at is the crystalline silica. Has that been addressed?
We don't enforce that air permit. I've never enforced one. The city has no enforcement on that. They had to meet the TCEQ requirements, and I assume they've met everything. They showed the letter that they met that, but the city has no enforcement on that. We have enforcement on a water pollution abatement plan. We don't have one on the industrial stormwater discharge permit. We don't have enforcement on that. We're not a big enough city, but I have to assume since they got it that they met TCEQ promise. We're not enforcing that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Monk, this is in the extraterritorial jurisdiction of the city.
Yes, ma'am, it
So
sure
we
is.
have no zoning or operational control other than that provided by law?
That's correct. There's no land use. They stayed in the ETJ, no land use control. We could monitor the water pollution abatement well. That actually goes over to the county because they're in the ETJ. We go out there until construction is completed because we have the salamander, the city water quality ordinance. We can go out during construction on that, but then it's not us anymore.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. So, Mr. Monk, just for the record, again, does the applicant meet all conditions required for approval?
For the city of Georgetown, yes.
Georgetown.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So just for the record, legislation of Texas states that the applicant, if the applicant meets all requirements for an application, we as the council are legally bound to approve. Is that correct?
That's what I understand.
Okay. Also, we understand that Texas is a private property rights state, and obviously we cannot annex the property. So meaning if we don't approve and if they have met all legally requirements, the applicant, we could risk basically the applicant coming back and suing us, right?
I'm not very legal, but I assume that's the case. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Is the applicant here?
We were trying to connect with the applicant. He's very familiar with it. I don't know if we made,
Well, I guess, I mean, we certainly understand what our limitations are, and it's quite unfortunate. And I think a lot of us feel if there's any way to deny or derail this project, we would. I don't think anybody wants a plant like this in their backyard. And I think it's unfortunate. Unfortunately, we are very limited as Planning and Zoning Commission of what we can and what we can't do legally.
yeah.
And that sometimes can be very frustrating for us. I guess what I would like to know from the applicant, it's unfortunate that he's not here to address members of the community is quite frankly, for the record, why he selected this location
Okay.
so close to Sun City.
Well, I understand he is on the line, ready to talk. Is that
Great.
correct?
That'd be
Okay.
great. And I think we would love to hear from him.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello? Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, my name is Campbell Key. I'm with the engineer, which submitted for the stormwater permit, Southwest Engineers. So I can ask questions from an engineering standpoint, but that's about it. I mean, I'm sorry, I can answer questions from an engineering standpoint.
I'm sorry, you're somewhat muddled. You can answer questions from,
Yeah, from an engineering standpoint on the plans that we provided to the city.
okay. Can you ask one thing? I mean, I know the applicant has the ability to run the plant 18 hours a day, 6 days a week. Is this the intent of the applicant to run the plant 95% of the time?
So Southwest Engineers was the applicant for submitting the plans to the city of Georgetown to receive a stormwater permit. The owner, Five Star Concrete, might be able to answer those questions better. I'm not exactly sure how often they plan to operate.
Okay. So we really don't know why Five Star Concrete did not provide the professional courtesy of showing up tonight to at least listen to some of our constituents, right?
Hello, can y'all hear me? Sorry. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, was that a question for me?
Yeah, I was just kind of, do we have any?
Yeah, no, I'm not sure exactly. I think the attorney might be there for Five Star, but I'm not 100% sure. I was just here to answer questions pertaining to the plans.
Okay. Do we have any other questions from anyone on the panel?
see. If we don't have any other questions from staff, Sophie, are you ready to start with public comment? Okay, so like I said, everybody will have 3 minutes. You can come up and state your name and address, then you'll have 3 minutes to address the commission. I'll remind you that this is not a question and answer session, but we are glad to hear your comments. So we'll start at the beginning. I've got Carol Dillon. So if you'd like to come up, again, name, address, and then we'll give you 3 minutes.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Carol.
Can you turn your
Turn on the
microphone on?
This?
Yeah,
Hello?
you might need to hit, is it on?
Yeah, yes.
Okay,
Okay, my name is Carol Dillon, and I live in Sun City. Do you want the address?
yes, ma'am.
532 Rockport Street, Georgetown, Texas.
Thank you.
Okay. So I know this is just, this is just about the stormwater drainage. We weren't ever able to get anywhere with all the pollution. But there are toxic metals and they're corrosive. The stormwater drains, I believe I understand, they don't have any filtration. So that goes, like the sanitary sewers do, so that goes down into, well, the cement, the sand, the silica, the chemicals, the admixtures, the fuels, and the lubricants, like from all the vehicles that are there, they go directly into the lakes and streams whenever it rains. Okay, so has Five Star Concrete, I believe, has other concrete plants, and do they have records that they are complying with this on their other concrete batch plants? And there was another mention about something about the city doesn't have any say-so in this. So then doesn't the county have any responsibility in this to like keep it from being built there? You know, there's going to be a school right there. There's going to be more homes. There's our homes. And so, I mean, all this pollution, it ends up in the water. So it's not just Five Star, it's the aggregate companies, it's all of them. So I just wish there was a way we could do better about this and just to have more clean air, clean water for ourselves, for our children, for the futures, you know, for their lives in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the next one I have is Joanne Randall. Okay.
Moving right along, nothing to see here.
Okay, so that, I believe those are our only, yeah, so these forms, Sophia, these that I got, are these people online that are, I have a Ardith Stewart. Oh, okay. If you'd like to come up.
Had an order we were gonna go in. I think Vilma was before myself.
I was given these in,
That order? Okay.
this is how I was given them, and I arranged them based on making sure that everybody was, when I was giving them, they weren't combined with the additional times. So we're not gonna discuss this with you guys sitting out there. I'll bring you up one at a time. You can share your comments and we'll move forward with it like that. I mean, it doesn't make any difference, but I just don't want to. I mean, if Ethan, if you want to come sort these, then we can go through them in their order, but I'm not going to shout back and forth with the crowd.
Travis, we had this sorted in order for speakers, for people to see their time.
Okay,
And I gave,
That-
I
this is-
gave it
this
to the
is- this is-
lady all in
right,
order.
And that's how I have it. They're in order. It has a speaker and it has the people that are giving additional time behind those names.
Yeah, because we had Vilma going first and someone was ceding her time to Vilma for 6 minutes, then Artith, then
Right.
Christina.
So I have Vilma,
Okay,
and then I have
come on, Vilma.
Sharon that's
Yeah.
conceding her time to
Okay.
Vilma, and then I've got Christina, and she's getting time from Marianne. So that's how, I mean,
Okay.
they're in order. I just, maybe the speakers aren't
Okay,
in order.
thank you.
It's not rocket science, folks.
I'm Vilma Brumant. I live on 309 Tangle Ridge Lane here in Georgetown. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
There is one businessman who wants to build a concrete batch plant in Georgetown. You can see the red triangle here, and that represents their property. Alongside it flows Berry Creek. Berry Creek flows through Sun City. This is the map of Sun City. In Sun City alone, there are 327 houses along the banks of Berry Creek. Berry Creek doesn't end there. It goes down through the town of Georgetown and down, it goes to the river of San Gabriel River. And there are 86 houses along outside Sun City. And you can also see that there's a total of 413 homes. You will be seeing and hearing more details from my fellow residents why this concrete plant, batch plant, really concerns us. There will be 8,488 homes that will be impacted here. Berry Creek is very important to Georgetown and goes through our city. We have 1,252 online petitioners urging to stop the concrete batch plant. These are some of the comments of our residents. Some won't move here anymore, and others said they will move out once they see the property values go down. Do you know that there are catfish here in Georgetown and they are 3 to 4 feet long? Here are some residents who need to swim into the water, sometimes with their grandchildren, just to retrieve their sailboats or buoys. Look at this place, how serene and beautiful Georgetown is. It is a pleasure to see this beautiful area with Bear Creek running through it. Sparkling water, Berry Creek. This is an example of the milky water, of contaminated water that can flow through Berry Creek if we are not going to be really doing something about it. Here are 8 trails in Sun City. We share this trail with the wildlife and in our backyards. This is a fawn that was born in my backyard. These are the animals that we share with. How will our quality of life be impacted? The traffic, the big trucks. Some are scared to hike along there once the plant is in operation. There is a city ordinance 11402, which is basically about the stormwater management. And there are 12 things that says shall be designed and constructed in a manner which promotes the development of the community. And I would like to call your attention to F, protect environmental quality, social well-being, and economic stability. Here are the chronology of 5-star. TCEQ on May 10th, there was a public hearing. It was approved, the air permit on June 14th, June 17th, the mayor and the owner came to Sun City, and over 100 participants voiced their disapproval. On June 27th, there was an online petition, and I have them all here that I would like to give to you. Today is our last chance to urge you, please don't approve this. We urge you, the Planning and Zoning Board, we beseech you to deny the permit to one businessman who wants to operate this concrete batch plant within a mile from 15,700 residents in Sun City, one businessman. Please consider the preservation of your residents' social well-being, health, and the economic stability of Georgetown. I don't know if Les Garrett is online. Please resend your application. Texas is huge. You have a lot of choices.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm looking at these and I'll just tell you guys, I've got Tom, Ardith, and I've got Christina, and those looks like those are the in-person ones. So whichever one you guys want to go next, we're good with. Just yes, I have all of those in order. So everybody that I mentioned their name will all have 6 minutes because everybody's got somebody behind them. So, yep.
Good evening, council. My name is Ardith Stewart. I live at 100 Blue Sky Court here in Georgetown. I'm a retired middle school science teacher who lives in Sun City now, and my degree is in city and regional planning and environmental management. I worked in the P&Z for the city of San Marcos, and then I worked for a developer in Austin. So I've sat where you are and had to have the people submit forms to me, and I've had to submit forms to the P&Z. And it is quite an undertaking, and you're good at what you do. I'm going to discuss the compliance history of 5-star. Okay, we have another ordinance, and I heard your engineer say that they had met certain requirements, but I did not hear him say that they had talked about that the city of Georgetown is allowed to consider the compliance history of 5-star. And that goes back to your ordinance, which is 1330-040. And 5-star has really not complied with their other facilities, which might give us some backbone here. There's zero room for error where this is going to lie right along Berry Creek. Any incidents of an illicit discharge has an immediate effect on Berry Creek. Who's going to deal with the cleanup? Who's going to pay for the cleanup? Here is the ordinance upon which I just referred. And you'll notice that in there, it says on the second line, the fourth word, shall. That means there's an obligation to make sure that they meet all requirements. And that includes our ability as the city to go back and look at their history of compliance. The ordinance says we can. We got to weed out the bad actors. I don't mind a good neighbor, but this neighbor scares me. These are their other facilities. If you'll notice, the Uhland facility feeds into Plum Creek. They've got basically a half a mile to take care of any problem. In Hutto, they've got 900 feet. Here they have nothing to stop an illicit discharge. Absolutely nothing. That's not a lot of good thought for me. These are what the EPA and TCEQ identifies as the pollutants that come from our lovely concrete batch plants. They're broken up into 3 categories: suspended solids, which we call silt or sediment, pH, and heavy metals. The items in yellow are where they have continuously violated at their other facilities. Okay, here goes the history. The owner of 5 Star was at a public hearing for TCEQ May 10th this year. He said he's a good neighbor and with a clean record. But information from the ECHO website, which any of us can access, says otherwise. There was a lovely meeting in Sun City at Mulligan's June the 17th, upon which he was also asked about his poor compliance history. Les Garrett's answer was, "Next question, please." That's scary. When questioned after the session, Mayor Schroeder stated Georgetown's not allowed to consider compliance at other facilities. The ordinance we just showed you says otherwise. Another meeting, May 5th this year, with a city engineer stated the city is not allowed to consider compliance history. Again, the ordinance says we are. My personal question is, why isn't that in all this paperwork somewhere? There's a history of repeated fences for pH and mercury. You ever tried to get rid of a mercury thermometer? One of those little old ones? You can't do it. You got to find a truck that has hazardous materials to get rid of one of those little things that we used to play with as kids. You can't get rid of it now. And that goes into our water. Now, here's the violations at Uhland. The stuff in red and yellow is bad. They have violations, and again, this comes from the ECHO website, the link is at the bottom, and they have exceeded at the Uhland facility they've exceeded all of these illicit discharges during 7 of the last quarters. That's over 50% of the time. I don't like those odds. I don't know about you, but I don't like them. Here's the pH and mercury violations at Hutto, close by. They've only been operating since 2020, and 5 Star exceeded its mercury discharge limits during the 4th quarter of 2020. They're higher than the permit allows. More violations, and these are actually the inspector's notes, which you can get online. Again, publicly available information. The detention pond hadn't been maintained. Unmaintained drainage channel, heavily eroded, allowed wastewater to flow. Who stops them and makes them go back and fix it so that the continued violations don't occur? The answer is TCEQ, and they're overwhelmed.
Okay, well, we're past 6 minutes, so if you'd like to make a
Okay,
few
this again is
closing-
just, you've seen this slide. This is what happens when things go sideways. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question of Mr. Monk?
Let's get through all of these and then we'll get to that. Okay, let's see. Who do we want next? We've got Tom McCabe, we've got Christina. Okay, come on up and you'll have 6 minutes.
My name is Christina Schwartfeger. I live at 407 Old Blue Mountain Lane in Georgetown in Sun City. I'm a retired environmental professional. I worked for 34 years. I have a PhD in chemistry. I worked primarily for industry. I represented Chevron, Exxon, Coca-Cola, companies like that. I'm very familiar with regulations, ordinances. At one point, I was a vice president at a major engineering and construction company, and I wasn't in the HR department. It's not scrolling down. There we go. Okay. So basically, it's my contention that the city has not addressed all the technical requirements in the ordinances 11.04 and 13.30. I believe that the design is inadequate to protect Berry Creek, and it only addresses stormwater as if it originates from residential and commercial facilities. Concrete batch plants are industrial. The starting ingredients are Portland cement and fly ash. That's a waste product from a coal plant. So these are definitely chemicals. The potential harm to Berry Creek is very real. This is what a badly designed stormwater system looks like. It's overflowing, it's milky. That's the sediment. It's got high pH. It can have toxic metals. This is not what comes out of a residential development or commercial. This is what comes out of an industrial plant. This is a location. You can see directly where the property is located within the floodplain of Berry Creek. As Ardith mentioned, there is zero contingency. When that stormwater system overflows, it's going directly into Berry Creek. There is no buffer zone. In my professional opinion, I would have checked does not comply with 11.04. And I'm going to go into why. You're going to see some of the details on that. Basically, your ordinance says that the stormwater management system shall be designed and constructed in a manner which, under F, protects environmental quality, and then L, attenuates the harm of contaminants collected and transported by stormwater. That's heavy metals and the pH and the silt. Okay, these are the discharge limits from TCEQ for concrete batch plants. You can see that, these are well known in this industry. We're not making this up. This is how TCEQ regulates these plants. Okay, now let's get into the design. This is where we see the flaws. Right now, basically 5-Star has proposed it's a sand filter with gravel, riprap, and geotextile fabric. It only has an 85% capture rate, which means that 15% of the stormwater escapes or is allowed to go out. The discharge limit for TCEQ is 0.0065% for suspended solids. The design of the system is inadequate. Also, this riprap and sand filter, it does nothing to neutralize high pH. It doesn't remove soluble metals. Okay, Ardith alluded to some of this. Here's some of the data. I mean, we're not making this up. These are actual stormwater discharge results from 5-Star's Uhland facility. You can see that they're frequently above the limit, which is 9. That's what these purple lines are here. Okay, let's switch to the other ordinance, 13.30.060. It says no person shall discharge any of the following substances into the MS4 or conveyances. Conveyances includes creeks and streams in the city of Georgetown. Any hazardous material. High pH materials, it's like dumping lye or Drano into Berry Creek. Okay, here's some examples of commonly available technologies. This is a CO2 bubbling system and sparging that is not currently called out in the design by the city engineers or by 5-Star. This could help neutralize pH. The stormwater system design, it lacks a concrete pad to support any kind of a CO2 tank or treatment technology. There's no electrical connections. There's no provisions for the water circulation pump or the input or the inlets. These systems, they run about $20,000, and it's used, the one vendor I talked to, he says he has 600 of these installed at concrete batch plants in the US. And you can see here in this one picture, you can see the ready-mix trucks in the background there. So the reasons why we believe 5 Stars permit should be denied. The current design is geared towards residential and commercial properties, not industrial, which has chemicals with heavy metals, high pH, and high levels of sediment. We have zero room for error given the proximity to Berry Creek and the stormwater flow direction. The ordinances do have provisions, basically where the burden is put on the board that there shall be control. Shall is an imperative. It's not optional. And we believe strongly that at a minimum, Georgetown should require this neutralization of the high pH using CO2 gas. I didn't even look into heavy metals. That's why they have their engineers and they need to figure out a technical solution. So with that, we respectfully request that the board, based on not complying with ordinances 11.04 and 13.30, should deny this permit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I wanted to point out that the owner is on the line of the concrete plant. He is available for comments now, or I am too.
Okay. Do we want to hear from yeah, we can go ahead and hear from the applicant. We've got one more, or we've got a couple more public comments, but if he's available now, let's go ahead and.
I'm here. Do y'all hear me?
Is the applicant on the line?
This is Les Scared. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So go ahead. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, yes, and so I appreciate everybody's comments tremendously. The environment is incredibly important to me, which is one of the reasons we chose to file for TCEQ's most strictest air quality permit for this facility. I'm very impressed with the technology that was just presented, the CO2 bubbler system. I've never seen that, but it's something that I would embrace wholeheartedly. And my team and I will research that, and I have no problem implementing that and putting it into our plan as a way to help control pH of any water that we capture at our site. Our facility on the 41 acres is at the extreme east side of the property. And when I was looking at the map, I believe we're over 1,500 feet. The plant itself would be 1,500 feet from Berry Creek. So I plan to utilize just a small 6 or 7 acres of that property and keep the rest of it in its natural state to provide not only a visual buffer from the community, but also help with any types of sound or light or any types of noise. I do intend on being an excellent neighbor. I follow all the rules, and we work very hard to be a good neighbor in the community. Thank you.
So, Mr. Garrett, this is Commissioner Heinzman. I just have a couple of questions for you since you're online, and thank you so much for dialing in.
Yes, ma'am.
Based on the presentations that the citizens of Sun City have provided this evening, and to your own admission, you have not seen some of this data, and we greatly appreciate your desire to continue to work with the citizens of Sun City to be a good neighbor. Are you willing to pull back your application at this time and revisit with the Sun City neighbors and go over where they find some discrepancies in your current plans?
In all honesty, I would prefer not to pull back my application tonight. I think I can integrate the CO2 bubbling system since that is outside of the application requirements. And we can look at adding any other types of technology like that may be available. As far as the application itself, my understanding from working with my engineering team is that we've met all the requirements that Georgetown requires and the state of Texas requires for this facility and for us to be able to legally operate on that piece of property.
And I do appreciate that comment. I was just going back to your comment of your aspiration of being a good neighbor.
Well, yes, ma'am. And I do intend to be a good neighbor, but I think we could move forward with the application tonight and get the approval on the items that it covers, and then continue to integrate any types of other new technology as we continue to move forward.
Okay. And of course, this doesn't really impact our ability to approve or deny, but just out of curiosity, I know that you have the ability to run the plant 18 hours a day, 6 days a week. And in your desire of being a good neighbor, is this your intent?
To run 18 hours a day, I want to make sure I'm tracking, ma'am.
Right. The applicant, it shows that you do have the ability to run the plant 18 hours a day, 6 days a week, which basically you would be starting operations about 5 a.m. and ending operations anywhere from, I don't know, 6 to 8 o'clock in the evening. Is that your desire? Or do you have?
The permit requires us to select a number of hours a day that we could run. But that's generally not what we do. We usually start around 5 in the morning. Generally, almost all of our trucks are home by 3:30 to 4 o'clock. Now, I may have office staff on premises, but we are generally done running in a 12 to kind of a 13-hour window.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, why did you select this property, knowing the proximity of the neighbors, Sun City, a retirement community? What was your thought process? And I know this has nothing to do with our ability to obviously deny or approve. I was just in the spirit of being a good neighbor. What were you thinking?
So the property that we share a border with to the north is an active limestone quarry that regularly blasts and has heavy truck traffic. There are quarries surrounding the area. And I felt that heavy industrial use fit into that part of into that area. Sharing a border with a quarry, putting the plant where we plan to put it to the far east. I felt that was fitting for the area and allowed us to operate, but being of like use to the neighboring properties.
Okay. So you feel confident that you are meeting all criteria as it pertains to air pollution?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you feel very comfortable that you meet all the emission limits set up by the TCEQ?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And particularly when it comes to crystalline silica, correct?
So I would say the crystalline silica, I would need to go back and research. I don't remember seeing that on in the permitting application or on the list. I would be very happy to do the research on that for you.
I think that would be very important. Obviously, people inhale very small crystalline silica particles are at an increased risk of developing diseases like lung cancer, COPD, kidney disease, scoliosis, and incurable lung disease.
Yeah.
Personally, being a cancer survivor, I think that would be of concern to me.
So one of the, and I'm sorry this didn't come to me a second ago, but one of the mitigation factors required by the permit is we sprinkle our stockpiles with water to keep them damp and to prevent any type of airborne particles coming off those piles. Then we sweep the site. We have on-site sweepers on our equipment that we pick up that dust. We don't just push it down the road. We actually sweep it into an enclosed container and then dispose of that properly. So we do have dust mitigation procedures in our TCEQ permit. And then I feel that we go above and beyond with the frequency of our sweeping and the try to do the dust control and mitigation to try to keep all those down. We are very different than an aggregate facility that has the ability to crush and dust, and they don't have to have paved roads, and they kick up a lot of dust as they drive. We are very different than those types of operations.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Monk, do you mind if we ask you a couple questions? So based on the presentations that you are hearing so far this evening, do you still feel confident that the applicant has met all the conditions required for approval? Especially considering 11.04 and 13.30.
I do. Do you? And the reason I'm making that statement is that we met with Dr. Schwartzberger once, and she enlightened us in some areas. And I also have Tiffany Spicer here, who is our MS4 professional. So when you're going into the second permit that's required by the TCEQ, we're relying where we can't enforce. The second permit is where that's the industrial pretreatment. And that second permit, our city is not big enough to enforce, but they have to get that. And I just have to trust the state on those heavy metals that second permit is for that. We're too small of a city to enforce it. Back on our permit, the water pollution abatement plan, it is a sand filter. Somebody's complaining about 85% removal. It picks up suspended solids, which attaches normal or pollutants to it, stuff that comes out of your cars. And it is designed, and that's the one we can do. It's designed to do that, and that's exactly right. But that's the TCEQ requirement for the permit we can. It's 80. In fact, ours goes higher because of the salamander ordinance. It goes to 85, and she alluded to 85. So you see, there's a permit above us, and the one that they're talking about, PhD, heavy metals, and all that. That's one that we're not big enough to do. I have to trust TCEQ on that. I will tell you that I contacted the head of the water and sewer department because, in my experience, when we get a hit on mercury downstream of one of our plants, our group chases it upstream. And so there's a lot of heavy metals that is in our wastewater permit, and it is horrific when one of them shows up. So I know that we're going to start chasing that. That was some more relief. I told her a month ago, and I told her again today that, and so we notified for that, and that's just our wastewater treatment permit, and it's looking for some of the things that they're alluding to. So I got TCEQ for the permit for that pH and all that. And I'm not familiar with it, but I can't control it. And then I've got our plant operators looking for it. And that's why I am comfortable still.
Okay.
Mr. Monk.
Yeah.
So there is a secondary state permit that's going to be required before operations begin that will address any heavy metals or pH levels that are allowed to be put into the water. So there will be
That's what
additional
I
foot-
understand, and I'd like to bring Tiffany up here, our MS4 operator, who is more familiar than I am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Sound kind of weird on this. But I would like to discuss with y'all about the stormwater aspect and what the city can control. So because this is in the ETJ of the recharge zone, the city has the authority for enforcement for construction. So if this site gets approved, I will be in charge of reviewing the stormwater pollution prevention plan and the permit with the state for construction. My job is to oversee it, that everything is accurate in the plan, that the controls are in place to help minimize the maximum amount of sediment as possible from leaving the site. And they have a certain limit, like how many times they have to do inspections. So I'll be verifying that they're keeping the frequency of inspections, which usually, because we're the Edwards Aquifer, it will be weekly with a half-an-inch rain event. And because the site, I understand, is next to Berry Creek and we have citizens that are concerned, this would be a priority to go out there on multiple events, to go out and do inspections and verify if there's any deficiencies, that they had those addressed as technologically or feasibly as soon as possible or before the next rain event as required by the construction drill permit. We will oversee this project until it reaches final stabilization, which means when the site reaches 70% stabilization, which no large bare areas, which means I can throw a hula hoop anywhere on the ground, and within 70% of that hula hoop has to be completed before they can terminate their permit. I would oversee that. And then as soon as that's completed, the industrial SWIP, which is what they will get permitted with the state for, that will be out of our control. But I'll be working with Williamson County, and I'm very close with TCEQ. So if we have residents who have concerns, they may come to me and I can go automatically to TCEQ to let them know that there are items of concern so they can get out there as soon as possible to get those items addressed.
Okay. Sophia, can I ask you a clarifying question? Are we looking at approving a conditional permit? Or are we looking at approving the permit?
The recommendation is to approve the permit, that it has met all our requirements. And I just want to say, I think there's still some public comment that hasn't been completed yet, of course.
There is. I've got a list of them here. Do you want to get to those first and then get back to this? Okay, well, let's do that. So we've got, I believe, Tom McCabe is our last in-person public comment. So 6 minutes, name, address.
Have we started? Over there, right, there it is. Tom McCabe, I live in Sun City at 110 Bee Creek Court. I come to you with a varied background, working in the public sector as well as in the private sector. Started off early in my career prosecuting environmental crimes and wrote regulations for EPA, and then transitioned to the private sector, managing corporate EH&S function for Northrop Grumman and Edison Mission Energy, and as well as heading up their environmental permitting organization for siting new and modified sites. Culminated my career at the end of 36 years, working for 6 years as a hearing board engineer, combining all of my experience from before and applying it private sector and the public sector perspective to overseeing the permitting and licensure of facilities at a state air agency. We have a few issues here, and they have to do with, obviously, the concrete batch plants. One is poor enforcement, and we know that we've seen the poor enforcement, the compliance issues associated with the applicant. We also are aware of poor enforcement history by the industry itself, as well as TCEQ not really doing its job in terms of enforcement and regulations. And we're also concerned, obviously, about the implications of the cleanup costs for illicit discharges. So if we look at this chart, one might be comforted somewhat by seeing that TCEQ is doing its job, right? So the far left talks about current violations in the country, in Texas and Williamson County. We've got 40% of the facilities, concrete batch plants in Williamson County that are in violation right now. Middle graph shows that half of those facilities have significant violations. And the last column shows that 80% of all facilities, concrete batch plants in Williamson County in the last 3 years have had violations. So you might take from that Williamson County is doing a great job. I mean, TCEQ is doing a great job in enforcing its rules. Well, Harris County had similar experience. Their director of pollution control services recently talked about a situation where they've been determined that 128 concrete batch plants were found to be operating within Harris County, and 122 of them, that's 95% of them, were in violation with state regulations. It's not a great compliance record, and it's not something that anybody, any organization should be proud of. Why are they so high? I mean, function of an effective regulatory program is an enforcement and accountability. So it's one thing to identify violations. It's another thing to enforce those violations, make the corrections, make the sources correct those violations and bring them into compliance. Those numbers should be single digits, not 95 or 80% compliance. I mean, out of compliance. Any effective regulatory program put on by a state should have single digits, not anything like that. So if, and this is not one of the applicant's operations, but if you don't have an effective enforcement program, this is what you're going to find. You can see this small berm here, designed to hold back the discharge, illicit discharges from being contained on the property. You can only imagine what that storm yesterday afternoon would have done to that berm. It would have been totally ineffective. So this is what happens if you have a poor regulation program, a poor enforcement program. This is what you're going to end up with. In fact, this instance, this facility that was down in Dripping Springs in South Travis County had over 4 years, 22 complaints, and only 2 NOVs were issued for this facility. And it's both NOVs were dismissed and illicit discharges continued. I think the most disturbing aspect of my review of this situation, this particular situation, are these comments under the last bullet here. These were comments that were extracted from the paperwork associated with the handling of these matters over a 4-year period. Refer, do not respond. This complaint has been referred to the City of Austin Development Services Department. This incident was referred to another entity, no investigation report generated. This is indicative of an agency that is not interested in enforcement, is not devoting its resources to actually solving the problem, getting an industry or a particular source to come into compliance with the requirements that the state require or mandated to enforce. So we're not opposed to development in any way, but we are concerned about what TCEQ has done in the past and what we can expect them to do in the future. They've not been an effective enforcer. They've not, we have no expectation that they will change. In fact, we should have every expectation that things will get worse as their resources are diminished and the expected development that we'll experience here in the state of Texas and Williamson County. So that it would be only expected that would get more diluted in terms of their addressing environmental compliance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Okay, and I show we have two virtual attendees, and I don't have access to see if we have other people with hands raised, but I've got a Tim Perry that's attending virtually that signed up to speak. And I believe he has been given 3 minutes as well, so 6 minutes. So Mr. Perry, are you on the
Yes,
line?
sir. I'm listening. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Can I share my screen? Hello?
Yeah, we're looking into it. 1 second.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I think somebody else has to stop sharing.
You should be able to share now.
Okay, there we go. All right. All right, my name is Tim Peary. I live at 10620 Signal Hill Road in Austin address, southwest of Austin in a little neighborhood called Signal Hill. And we're going to talk about what you guys are going to be, where you're going to be in a few years. We were unfortunate enough to have a concrete company move in with no warning and nothing. So here we go. And the kind of issues that happen. So rather than this as being a technical presentation or something where you have to check a lot of boxes or look at numbers so much, it's really what is the experience of having an operation like that in your neighborhood. So these are some of the things that happen. I hope you're interested.
You might want to, can you try to share your screen again? We're not seeing.
Oh, okay, there you go. All right.
There you go. We can see that now. Thank you.
Sorry, yeah. All right, so this is really about the real actual effect on people that have to live near an operation like this. This is our road, and you can see we got some signs up there. This is a little road. It has buttons. They finally put buttons in, but it's too narrow to paint stripes on. Well, we've had to form this organization called Signal Hill Area Alliance. And the major impetus is the Easy Mix Concrete Plant, which is operating right in the middle of this residential neighborhood. And they are your classic bad actor. They have been called so by multiple officials and elected officials. And this is what it's like. So the traffic is crazy. They're right on a blind corner. Nobody reviewed this. Nobody said this was a good idea to put it here. These trucks come charging through. It's very dangerous. We've had many close calls. They'll blow through that stop sign at 9 miles an hour, as we've calculated, and we can't get the police to do much of anything about it. And it's a blind corner from this side too. These are very large trucks. I tell my wife not to argue because they're much bigger than you. They run overweight. You can see the load limit there is a fraction of what these trucks actually weigh. They have an overweight permit for some of their trucks, but they don't bother to get them for all of them. And again, nobody's enforcing the rules. They ruined this road very quickly in operating these trucks. It was never made for this kind of thing. And we, at our insistence and at taxpayer expense, this road has been repaved twice in the last 2 years, and that will tell you something about what a punishing this road takes. By the way, this particular driver has flipped this trailer on Easy Mix property 3 times, dumping the contents and making a big mess. And they start very, very early and go very, very late. That 18 hours that was denied earlier is probably pretty much what we're talking about. It affects property values severely. This house in the back of this picture has been for sale twice. They can't sell it. It overlooks their parking lot. And it's very dusty. We're working on getting dust monitors in here and being part of the 10-county CapCog monitoring program. But we have not, we don't expect much from TCEQ. This is their permit by rule application for this particular operator. They insisted on their application that there was no residences within 1,800 feet. And this is how many there actually are, well over 50 residences within the 1,800-foot radius that they said there was none. Trustworthy, I would not put much into what they say. Now, they told us when they saw this road, it's very eclectic. There's $1 million houses and there's mobile homes. They looked at the mobile homes and they said, oh, these people won't give us any trouble. Well, I stood by one of those homes yesterday, which you could actually see in the first slide I showed you. And the widow who lives there told me that her husband, who was fighting cancer, was really taken down, was really taken out by his COPD causing pneumonia. And he passed away in December. And it also, he had told us that he couldn't be outside much because of all the dust, which was mostly from Easy Mix. Closer to home, my wife has multiple myeloma, which is an incurable blood cancer. Most likely it came from exposure to X-rays or pesticides when she was a child, when they regulated even less effectively than they do today. We don't know what's going to happen because somebody was careless or overlooked some pollutant or chemical or radiation, but we know that it can be devastating. Joan has had to suffer through this grueling stem cell transplant procedure twice and has endured the months-long recovery and her monthly treatment, which is very difficult, all to the grinding, beeping, and shaking of Easy Mix. We couldn't get them to put up barriers or to be any quieter, so we made an album of their greatest hits. I don't know if you can hear that. Get an idea of what it's like to be here.
Mr. Perry, your time's up. I know we gave you a little bit extra because you had issues with your screen, but your 6 minutes are up. So we thank you for your time. Do we have any other hands raised on our? I don't have any more. I don't have any more people that signed up to speak unless, no. Okay. So. In that case, we will close public hearing and then the floor will be open to a motion. And at that point, then we can have some discussion on this item. Yeah, if we have a motion and a second, then we can have discussion. You want us to have questions for him first, or you want us to make? Okay, yeah, if you've got questions for the applicant, go ahead.
So, Mr. Garrett, are you still online? Mr. Garrett, are you still online?
Yes, sir, I sure am.
Okay, this is Commissioner Warren. So explain to me the Uhland and the Hutto violations.
So I think the violation that gets everybody's attention is the Mercury. In my understanding, the Mercury happened at the Uhland location in the past. And so it's a technical point, and where we sample our water, you sample where the water leaves your property. Well, we are essentially downhill from several other buildings and another industrial building. And we don't sample where the water leaves our operation. We have to sample where the water leaves our property, and it is commingled water at that point. And we had that mercury test come back, and we all looked at each other and said, we don't know where this mercury came from, especially not in those kinds of concentrations, since we've not had that test result again. We have had pH, the water be over the pH limit. We are working to mitigate that, trying to introduce bases to offset the acid, to lower those pHs. And then the violation that we had in the Hutto, it wasn't that we had water leaving our property. It was the TCEQ felt that we could control our suspended solids better. And we agreed. And so we took out our detention ponds that we had in place. And they were maybe a 20,000 gallon water holding in volume. And we replaced that with about 1.5 million gallons of water storage over a multiple stage process to capture all the water, control the suspended solids, and try to help bring the pH down before it would ever leave. And that's why we have no, that notices, they were all resolved and weren't turned into actual violations, because we immediately responded to the TCEQs asking for us to make changes. And in fact, we did those so well and made them so large to ensure we mitigate any issues that we may have in the future. We did not have any water leave over all the rains we've had these last 3 months. We've been able to capture that water and keep it on site. And then by doing so, we control those suspended solids. We're mitigating the pH, and then we're actually recycling that water and using it in our process to lower our total freshwater usage in our site.
And then as a follow-up, what kind of insurance do you carry on that for cleanup in the event that you do discharge mercury or heavy metals, or you do screw up the creek? What kind of insurance coverage do you have and maintain to do that? Because that kind of cleanup can run anywhere from $10 million to $100 million, and the city doesn't have that kind of fund. So what kind of insurance have you got to ensure that if there is an involuntary discharge, that you and your company take care of it and not the citizens of Georgetown?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I want to make sure is clear that our site, where that plant's going to be, is going to be roughly 1,500 feet away from Berry Creek. And as they noted in one of the slides earlier, we're about 2,700 feet from Plum Creek, and we're 900 feet from Mustang Creek at our other facility. This one is going to be much farther away than we are from the Mustang Creek. So not only do we have distance that could help mitigate if we had water come out of those ponds, or we had some type of heavy metal. And I would like to reiterate, the heavy metal is a bit of a conundrum for us of where that could have happened. And I feel it could have come from a neighbor, but it's something we still watch and monitor. We do carry environmental liability insurance to pay for cleanup. And that's something I'd be very happy to get the information on and share with the city moving forward. But we do carry policies.
I would certainly like to see that.
Okay. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Anybody else have questions for the applicant? Questions for staff?
So I have questions for staff.
Okay.
I have questions for, thank you very much. Mr. Mott? I just want to verify whether it's you and Sophia, based again on everything that we've heard tonight, everything, are we still confident that the applicant has met all criteria,
The city criteria, yes, we are.
city criteria.
Mhm.
All right, so the permit is not conditional. They have met and they have received all permits required. Is that correct?
They are in the process of getting the water pollution abatement plan completed, and that's when we control construction until that happens. We do that all the time. They have the air permit, and the big one, the discharge permit, comes at construction completion. Then they apply to the TCEQ for that one.
Okay. Sophia, just for the record, again, does the applicant meet all conditions required for approval?
Yes, our city engineer has reviewed the application and is making a recommendation to you for approval.
Okay. The only reason why I keep reiterating that is the state of Texas does note that if the applicant meets all requirements of an application, we're legally bound to approve, whether we like it or not. But what?
There was a city require proof of good stewardship projects. In those, and it was, I believe it was the lady, PhD lady. But I believe that there's in our city ordinance, it says the city may require additional proof of good neighborhood and yada, yada, yada. But so it meets the criteria, but the city can require more.
Require proof of compliance.
Right, proof of compliance and other things. It's obvious to me that Mr. Garrett has not been, he's using the other guy defense. Oh, it wasn't me, it was the other guy. So I would like to, I would like to shelve this and address a couple of the issues brought up by.
Hold on a second. First of all, we can ask questions, but we need a motion before we have discussion.
Okay.
But I don't believe because I know which road you're going down, if you shelve this and you push it off tonight, it's going to get approved either way.
Okay.
So
I
keep
can go
that
by
in
my
mind.
conscience. I don't really care whether it gets, but what happens to it afterwards. I go
Okay.
with my conscience.
No, I'm just making sure that everybody's clear with that. That's not something that. So would somebody like to make a motion?
I had one more question.
Go for it.
For staff. I'm sorry. Sophia, is it staff's position that this body may have authority to reject this type of application based on the ordinances that were cited during the public hearing? I don't know if those ordinances really provide that authority or not, and I wondered if you had any input on that.
And I'm going to go ahead and respond. And David, if I misstep, please let me know. The criteria on the screen right now is the criteria in the UDC in which this particular application must be judged. Staff has reviewed the application for this criteria and has found that it is consistent and meets the approval criteria that's been established for all stormwater permits. So this is the criteria in which we have reviewed this application, and this is the criteria in which we are saying to
And
the planning
just
and
this
zoning.
criteria,
Just this
not
criteria.
something we found somewhere else in the
That's
city's
right.
website.
The UDC outlines this criteria for approval and consideration.
Thank you.
I have no other questions.
Okay, so if somebody wants to make, if we have a motion, then we can have a discussion.
To approve.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Haney,
Second.
second by Commissioner Stanley. So we can have discussion on this item at this point. And I understand we've heard a lot of negative things about concrete batch plants, and we've had a lot of discussion about what could happen. Just want to reiterate that at this point, we're not reviewing this from a zoning application or anything as such other than a stormwater permit, and we're not discussing or looking at what's happening in the future. So like Sophia said, this criteria that's on the screen is what we're able to use to decision this item. So,
In maybe, are we in discussion now?
yep, go ahead.
So I'm reading 1330 that we talked about, and y'all can correct me. But the applicability of 1330, the whole chapter is for areas of MS4 within the corporate city limits of the city.
I believe that's how I understood it when I read it earlier today, is
And
those don't deal with the ETJ, correct?
Yeah, and I'm just wondering if I'm reading that right.
That's how I understood it, and they seem to agree.
Yes, ma'am, that'd be great.
Because
Somebody
I
knows what
believe
they're
it-
talking about, come talk to me.
I believe if this was inside the city limits, it'd be a
A whole different
totally
discussion.
different discussion, but it's not. And so this is where we are.
That is correct. So with the illicit discharges ordinance, it's for regulation for the TXR 15, which is construction, and the industrial will be included if it was within the city limits. The reason why we have jurisdiction over the construction of this project, because it's in the ETJ, is due to the salamander ordinance located in the UDC. That's why I have authority to review the stormwater pollution prevention plan for the construction. And when that's completed, it's on the county and TCEQ to regulate the after process.
Thank you. And let me set the record straight. When I said I want somebody to come talk to me that knows what they're talking about, y'all's presentation was impressive and your credentials were impressive. I'm not talking about y'all. I'm talking about me trying to figure out which way it's going on. So please don't take it that way.
Thank you. Unless I need to stay up here for a minute.
Anybody else have any discussion, input, questions?
What about on Bravo? It says that the pollution management requirements of Chapter 11, isn't Chapter 11 where it said the city may require compliance? Doesn't that apply to the compliance? My concern is that we're going to have someone who's got a history of not complying set up an operation that could cause irreparable damage.
I think he's met everything right now. And I think we have a lot of checks and balances. I've been here a lot of years, and I've seen
I know.
when some colored water hits the river, and I've seen our reaction on it. And that was without Tiffany. And it's much faster now. And so, they've met everything for the construction, and then there's stuff that's above us. I think we have reaction stuff set up, but that's the only way I can answer it. I think they've met everything, and I can't. When the future gets here, we're gonna.
Anyone else have anything to add? Would you like to add something? It's a difficult issue. I mean, I agree with Commissioner Stanley. You guys, your presentation, very well informed. I can't say that I wouldn't be sitting where you are if this was coming to me. At the same time, I've spent a lot of time reading and looking at this, and I don't see a way around it.
And I think also to reiterate, I think a lot of us feel if there was any way to deny or derail this, we would. I don't think anyone would like this in their backyard, to be quite frank, for a lot of reasons. We certainly hope the applicant will exceed our expectations of being a good neighbor and to work with you. And that's a big leap. However, legally, from what I'm hearing from city staff, Sophia, and from Mr. Monk, they are meeting all the qualifications. And as such, we do have limitations of what we can do because this is not within the city of Georgetown. And we can't annex the property. So I think at this time, there's nothing we can legally do to prevent this application from moving forward, unfortunately.
I have one other comment. Mr. McCabe's comments regarding TCEQ's abdication of its responsibilities regarding investigating and resolving compliance issues. I don't